Thank you, Chief Secretary. Members of the Fourth Estate, Cabinet received the update on the 2023-2024 Summer Crops Marketing and Food Security Outlook Report from March 2025 and the 2024 Winter Cereals Plan as presented by the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, Honorable Dr. A.J. Masuka. The country's food balance sheet to March 2025 indicates that 6.2 million rural population will require food assistance. Taking into consideration the rural population requirements to March 2025 and the school feeding program to April 2025, the maximum amount of grain required is 465,000 metric tons. The current stocks in the strategic grain reserve, comprising wheat, maize, and traditional grains, are at 265,000 metric tons, excluding 32,000 metric tons imported by government of Zimbabwe to date. The 200,000 metric tons shortfall will be met by the winter wheat harvest surplus on the national annual requirement estimated at 240,000 metric tons, as well as additional grain imports by government estimated at 300,000 metric tons. Meanwhile, the government of Zimbabwe will accelerate depot-to-depot grain movement for the current period of August to October 2024. The Grain Marketing Board is now operating 50 agro shops supported by 12 hammer mills, mostly in rural areas, and peri-urban depots as part of the government's price stabilization thrust, and to enhance product availability, accessibility, and affordability. The commodities sold at these agro shops include mealie meal, sugar, rice, salt, flour, soap, and cooking oil. Silo Foods complementary products include coffee, bran, dried carpenter, flour, grits, maize meal, salt, silo semp, and traditional mealie meal. The private sector is expected to import all stock feed requirements to March 2025 of 400,000 metric tons and urban maize requirements of up to 450,000 metric tons. To date, 567,000 metric tons has been imported. The import permits worth 1.8 million metric tons of maize are active. Regarding the Winter Cereals Plan, 121,982 hectares of wheat, 2,100 hectares of maize, 3,732 hectares of potatoes, 6,449 hectares of barley, and 3,000 hectares of seed wheat were planted. The wheat-based food security strategy is therefore sufficiently robust to meet our needs to March 2025. Cabinet considered and approved the Presidential Solarization Project by the Rural Infrastructure Development Agency as presented by the Minister of State for Presidential Affairs and Devolution, Honorable Lovemore Matuke. The project seeks to promote the rural industrialization development agenda and the realization of the Rural Development 8.0 strategy by expanding solar-powered infrastructure. Related benefits of the Presidential Solarization Project includes piped water system, nutrition gardening, livestock watering, and household usage of power for domestic household purposes. Each rural household will be equipped with a solar system which will power electrical appliances, while the solar-powered water system will be utilized for submersible pumps that will enhance agricultural productivity and food security. The system will be installed in remote locations which do not require considerable grid infrastructure. The Presidential Solarization Project will build resilient communities and develop the communities by utilizing non-polluting green energy sources. Cabinet received reports on progress made in the implementation of priority projects for the second 100-day cycle of 2024 as presented by the Ministers of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs and the Minister of National Housing and Social Amenities. The Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, Honorable Ziyambi Ziyambi, highlighted the following achievements in terms of projects under his purview: the regrading and rehabilitation and reintegration of 112 inmates at Anju Prison in Matabeleland North Province have acquired various skills in brick processing industry, whilst 80 inmates have been capacitated on seedlings and transplanting of various crops. At Mazoe Prison in Mashonaland Central Province, 20 inmates acquired skills in the interpretation of plans, foundation works, and bricklaying, while 50 inmates were capacitated in seeding and transplanting of cabbages and onions. Mutimurefu Prison in Mashingo Province, inmates were successfully capacitated with agro-based skills. Inmates benefited from agro-based skills at the 40-hectare wheat crop under the Senda Pivot Irrigation Facility at Urungwe Prison in Mashonaland West Province. The Chiredzi new magistrate court complex is now 98% complete, while the Gwanda new court complex is 63% complete. The Mutawatawa new magistrates court is at 70% in terms of completion, while the testing of the integrated electronic case management system is ongoing. The Honorable Minister of National Housing and Social Amenities, Honorable Jemu Soda, highlighted the following achievements in terms of projects under his purview. The construction of the 4x3-story blocks of flats with 48 units in Dzivarasekwa, Harare, have been completed and commissioned by His Excellency the President, Dr. Edim Nangagwa. The construction of the 4x4-story blocks of flats with 64 units in Marondera is now at 83% in terms of completion. The construction of 19 civil servants housing units in Lupane has been finalized. The construction of 20 houses for Binga flood victims has been completed, and the construction of the other 17 houses is ongoing. The construction of the Mtawatawa Waiting Mothers Shelter is ongoing, and the ministry facilitated private sector projects such as the 723 stands and the construction of the 360 housing units of Batanai housing projects in Chinhoyi by the National Social Security Authority of Zimbabwe, 36 Marondera flats and 10 Churchill cluster homes by FBC Building Society and 72 Karobro flats by Homelink. Cabinet considered and approved the principles of the National Archives and Records Management Bill as presented by the Minister of Home Affairs and Cultural Heritage, Honorable Kazembe Kazembe. Cabinet notes that the amendment of the Principal Act has been necessitated by the need to modernize the operations of the National Archives of Zimbabwe and for the country to comply with international convention standards. Furthermore, the amendments will improve the enforcement capacity of the National Archives of Zimbabwe. The name of the department will be changed from the National Archives to the National Archives and Records Management of Zimbabwe. The Act will provide for the acquisition, storage, preservation, and access to the documentary heritage of Zimbabwe, as well as expand the mandate of the National Archives of Zimbabwe when interacting with other institutions. The amendment will make it mandatory for ministries and institutions in possession of public records to deposit them with the National Archives of Zimbabwe. Pertaining to access to public archives and public records, the principles provide for the following: access to archives in line with other relevant acts, the doctrine of confidentiality, access shall not be unreasonably denied, with the director compelled to give reasons where he or she denies access to archives or public records in possession of the National Archives of Zimbabwe, and the National Archives of the Zimbabwe Directorate should have access to historical records that have been declared protected, which may be in possession of private collections and public institutions. On the removal or exportation of public archives and records, Cabinet would like to report that Section 11 of the Principal Act unequivocally prohibits the exportation of public archives and records from Zimbabwe unless for official purposes. The Minister, on recommendation by the Director, will issue permits for the temporary removal of archives from Zimbabwe. The transfer of public archives and public records from an archive to another within Zimbabwe should be done with a permit issued by the Director of the National Archives of Zimbabwe. Amendments will also provide for the establishment of an electronic documents and records management system. Cabinet considered and approved the principles of the Lotteries and Gaming Amendment Bill as presented by the Minister of Home Affairs and Cultural Heritage, Honorable Kazembe Kazembe. The Lotteries and Gaming Amendment Bill incorporates anti-money laundering rules to promote responsible gambling and consumer protection by focusing on the accountability of individuals within gambling companies through imposition of financial penalties and other sanctions. The name of the Lotteries and Gaming Board will be changed to the Gaming Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe. The board will advise and report to the minister who administers the Principal Act at all times in line with the Public Entities and Corporate Governance Act. The functions of the board will be broadened to give the board more enforcement powers to ensure compliance. The terms of office and condition of service of the members will be amended to align with the limit set by Section 11, subsection 2 of the Public Entities and Corporate Governance Act. Cabinet would like to highlight that all board members and senior staff members will be required to declare their assets within 3 months after appointment or reappointment, or within 2 months after ceasing to be a member of the entity. This is meant to ensure transparency and avoidance of conflicts of interest. Furthermore, the board will be mandated to establish and maintain an electronic computer or communication system to send or receive data relating to the functioning of any gambling machine or device, betting for the purpose of monitoring and operation of such machines or device, and for computation of revenues and taxes due to the board. Operators who fail to cooperate will be sanctioned with a fine or imprisonment. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Let us move to the first round of 3 questions. Then we will ask the Honorable Ministers here present to respond to those questions. Over to you, colleagues.
the AP Chief.
Yes.
Thank you, Chief Secretary. My name is Mukuta Ishwere from the Herald. My question is directed to the Minister of Agriculture. I just want to know that the expected yield, you have given us a number of people who are food insecure. Now that very soon we'll be harvesting something from our winter crops, is that number going to decrease? What are the permutations of people who are likely still going to be food insecure after the winter harvest?
Thank you very much. Any other question? Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Chief. The first question is from Mukodze Chingwere in relation to the harvest that we're expecting as a country versus the food insecure population in our country in terms of the deficit. Over to you, Minister.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mukodze, for the question. If I understood it correctly, maybe let's contextualize again. We are expecting 600,000 metric tons of wheat from 121,982 hectares that were planted, which has exceeded the target that was been given of 120,000. That is grown by just under 1,000 farmers, commercial farmers. The reflection on the food insecure population relates to the food insecure population in rural areas, in communal areas. So of the 9.2 million people in rural Zimbabwe, 6.2 million people will require assistance between now and March next year. So whether we harvest 600,000 metric tons or not, that number will most likely not change. In fact, it might increase the number of needy people. But we have put in context that the shortfall that we are likely to have, we require 464,000 metric tons to feed the 6.2 million people at 7.5 kgs per person per month, and increasing that to 8.5 kgs per person per month from October through to March. We have 4.5 million learners and primary school going children, and we are feeding them at the rate of 27,000 metric tons per term. And so they will require 55,000 metric tons for the third term and the first term of 2025. We have in the strategic grain reserve, as of yesterday, 264,000 metric tons. So the shortfall is 200,000 metric tons for what government will take care of, which is feeding the rural population and ensuring that learners have a hot meal once a day when they go to school. We anticipate that we are going to harvest 600,000 metric tons of wheat, and the season has been very good. We require 360,000 metric tons for normal consumption for 12 months to September next year. So the difference between what we're going to harvest of 600,000 metric tons and the 360,000 metric tons for bread, scones, and other things is 240,000 metric tons. If we took that and put to the strategic grain reserve, it is more than enough to meet the shortfall of 200,000 metric tons, which is where government draws this comfort that the wheat-based food security strategy is indeed working. But as an additional risk mitigation measure, the government has put in place a mechanism to import 300,000 metric tons, of which 32,000 metric tons has now arrived, which is why we are saying that we are very comfortable with the plans that government has of providing food to all the rural people that need the food and for the school feeding program. And while we are at that, we said the 1.7 million urban people will receive the equivalent in cash of 7.5 kgs per month, and that will increase from October onwards. The private sector, we have indicated capacity to import 1 million metric tons to assist and complement government in this effort, have so far imported 567,000 metric tons. And they will concentrate on feeding the urban people and also for provision of feed. So that's the context in which we find ourselves, and this is where we're saying this is the food security outlook to March 2025. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Any other question? Yes.
Thank you so much, Chief Secretary. My name is Theophilus Chuma from ZBC, and my question is directed to Honourable Masuka. Closely related to issues of food security, Honourable Minister, I would like to understand what are some of the strategies that will be implemented this year, seeing that the latest focus that has been given by the climate experts at the ongoing Southern Africa Regional Climate Outlook Forum has just predicted a normal to above normal rainfall season for the Southern African region. Have there been any projections in terms of how the 2024-2025 season is going to play out from the ministry side? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Honourable Minister, over to you.
Thank you, Chief Secretary. The question also relates to the Minister of Lands in terms of the strategy given the analysis that has been done in terms of the environment that predicts that we have normal to above normal in terms of rainfall for the 2024-2025. What strategy have we put in place? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank Theophilus for that question. Cabinet approved a couple of weeks ago the summer plan. So already in terms of planning, we have a very concrete plan to ensure that we respond, and we respond resoundingly to the expected normal to above normal rainfall season. First, the impact will likely be felt this winter as we harvest the winter wheat. So in terms of our planning, we have said the rains will be early. So we must therefore put in place mechanisms to ensure that we combine all the wheat by the 15th of October. And the 310 combine harvesters in the country are being configured and reconfigured to ensure that that happens. And farmers have been allocated to wheat harvesting clusters, and we now know the wheat date of planting and the likely week that they are also going to be harvesting, and there's that matchmaking. We've also now begun to move grain from the Mashonaland provinces, where we still have quite a lot of wheat in storage, to the southern provinces to make way for the incoming harvest. We also are beginning to look at what GMB depots can take higher moisture wheat. And we are looking at about 13.1% instead of the normal 12.5%. So with the expected early rains, there are also consequences for the winter wheat, so that we avoid that being rained on. We expect that we will rebound, and 3.2 million metric tons of cereals are planned for the 2024-2025 season. And this will be produced under the Presidential Input Scheme from Vudza Intwasa, and there will be lots of agroecological tailoring and tailoring crops to regions. We also expect the private sector to come under the umbrella of the Food Contractors Association and support 90,000 hectares. We expect the ADA scheme, which has become the food security mechanism for the government, to focus on 100,000 hectares, 60,000 hectares irrigated maize, and the balance being dryland maize and sorghum. We also expect self-financed farmers to come on board to be able to assist, as they may have the linkages with banks and can get credit, or those that are in communal areas will rely on a transfer of cash from people from town. We also expect the government-enabled, bank-facilitated financing, which we used to call Command, to be in operation and to support at least 65,000 hectares in the coming season. So 2 million hectares of maize will be under production about 500,000 metric tons, 500,000 hectares of traditional grains. We expect other crops such as tobacco to rebound also, and rebound in a big way. We have a record seed sales for tobacco, for example, and we expect more than 300 million kilograms to be produced. Similarly, we have very robust plans for Kotco. We expect that they'll be able to produce upwards of 110 million kilograms of cotton, up from the 10 million that they produced this year. So we have very concrete plans for this summer to be able to take advantage of these rains to ensure that we can produce enough for ourselves and replenish the strategic grain reserve. But more importantly, as we climate-proof agriculture at household level through Pfumvudza Intwasa, it is absolutely critical that Zimbabwe prepares and expands irrigation development, so that whether it rains or not, Zimbabwe is able to produce sufficient to feed itself in a year where we have abundant rain, and in a year such as the one that we've passed, where we had this damaging El Nino year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Ministers. We've come to the end of today's post-cabinet press briefing. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you, Chief Secretary, Chair.